Greetings, greetings, greetings. You are now tuned into the Vault. Trust, Christian, own, nothing, control everything. Just want to thank you for tuning in live, listening to replay. Always appreciate everybody that tunes in live, listens in the replay. This is the Vault, episode 442. Breach of trust equals termination of trust. And so we definitely wanted to say this is definitely something that was brought up in a consultation. So, these are things that we always deal with on the sector, and we just want to go ahead and address these questions that people have, about a breach of trust and or termination of trust, and how these things happen. So we're going to talk about that today on this particular episode. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. We always got to preface that before every episode because we've dealt with some things and just got to always talk about that. But that goes into what we're going to talk about on this episode today, which is breach of trust equals termination of trust. This is the Vault episode 442. Trust Christian, own nothing, control everything. Appreciate you for tuning in live, listening to replay. So let's just go ahead and hop into it. When we talk about a breach of trust, this is something that a lot of times people walk into these situations like, oh, it's trusteeship, or there's a change in the agreement. Well, if there's a change in the agreement, there's a breach. When there's a breach, there's a termination of the trust, of the contract, because it's not an agreement anymore. We got different contract that's been put up. Now we're talking adhesion contracts. See, people don't understand that we're in the sector, so we understand what adhesion contracts are. Oh, we're just gonna put something else up here as a proxy for whatever in whatever situations we want to do. 'Cause that's ultimately what it is. It's like calling your bluff. Oh, we're gonna put out this really because we want this outcome, determined outcome. See, this is why you gotta have mentors. So we went over this with our advisory trustee, senior mentorship, trusteeship. Says a breach of trust is a termination of trust. That means a termination of contract. Really? So what happens when you have a bad year? Is that the case as a trustee? Is it a breach? Is it a termination? What happens when you break the silence of the non-disclosure agreement? When you breach the contract? Did you breach the contract? When you started talking more than what the non-disclosure told you to talk? That's called a termination of contract. When you speak more than what the non-disclosure allows. See, it's interesting to see the world we live in where people can dodge such small contracts of even holding themselves accountable to the non-disclosures that they're in with these companies. You think about it, most companies you sign are non-disclosures, even almost on the sales side, when you're buying services and products, they're making you sign non-disclosures that you won't. If you find out their proprietary, stuff, you won't go out here and duplicate it. That's clearly if you're just even partaking in their product. It's their intellectual property. That's why they're going to sue you. It's for their intellectual property. And so when we see these things, that's why they're suing you. It's because you have their intellectual property. So this is where, you know, they might think that you're small fries, which at the vault, maybe you all, maybe the world, maybe someone thinks that that's possible, but in all actuality, it's not. Because when you understand intellectual property, how are you going to steal, which we talked about on our channel numerous times, which is name, image, and likeness? You stealing someone's name, image, and likeness is a breach of trust, which is a termination of trust. So now they can sue you for their name, image, and likeness. But this is where we are, where people want to say, oh, well, I had to do this because I wanted this desired outcome. Well, you do want a desired outcome, but are you breaching the trust in the contract in the first place to even get an outcome? Did you breach the contract yourself? Did you breach it to have it to be a determination? Or was it the other party? See, there's two parties that have to be in agreement. And once again, the breach comes from there being a disagreement. That's a part of the agreement now. It's not in it. Sometimes people try to call them adhesions, contracts. These are additional contracts to this one contract. We're gonna add on some new codicils, add on some new amendments. We're gonna have those conversations. What without the other agreeing parties? Right. Breach of trust equals termination of trust. But in the world, people trying to step over here in the private, how you stepping over into a sector where it's based off of you keeping your word? It's not just the public, it's the republic. It's where people, yes, can do contracts through handshakes. Why? Because it's the private. People are everybody in the public wants to a degree, complain about the public paper warfare. Well, if that's the case, how are you ever going to say that yes, you can get to a place where you can trust your neighbor, do business with your neighbor, and do them in quality contracts, where it's not so much public statutory regulation in place in the first place. But then people want to blame it for every other reason. Okay, but let's stick to the topic: breach of the trust. So what happens when they do that? When you do that, there's a termination. It's not just of the trustee, it's of trust. Oh man, Judge Christian, I can't believe that. So my penalty isn't just me. The penalty is the whole situation. Exactly. But how many know that? How many take that to heart? Oh man, we could say breach of contract is termination of contract. That's a fact. How many people are going to be able to handle that though? Oh man, you're right about that. It is just a termination of contract. So I'm not going to be able to keep and stay in the contract no more, and neither is the contract going to be around. So whatever it is, it's got to sell off all of its assets because it's a termination. What assets does it hold? Did it hold any assets? Why would you breach the trust and then there be not a termination? Breaching definitely in the private sector involves public exposure. Oh, I'm going to expose this in the public. I'm going to go over this in the public. Well, once there's a private introduced into the public, there's a termination of contract. It's a termination of trust. Why? Because it's not called private if it's in the public. That's the challenging part about it. But is there a private sector? Yes. Is there that's the bottom line. That they talk about it all the time in the public. There's a private sector. We're talking about the private sector. But when there's a breach of trust, then there's a termination of it. Go out. Breaches of trust is the trust document going from the private to the public. Any governing instrument that's a private one because it's a private contract. That's what makes it the environment so sacred. So no, no. Let's talk about that. Well, is it just on one party's end or on all parties' end? It's been exposed. Who exposed it? Who knows? It's been exposed. So what do? Do you terminate? Or is it, oh, we're just going to figure it out. We're going to keep rolling with it? No. You got to be able to pivot, as they say. But it's not even pivot. It's called just do what it says. Termination. It's the end. That's the way the contract is set up. Everything doesn't live forever. So if you breach it, is it not an ending? It's a breach. It's got a hole in the ship. Oh man, well can't we patch it up? Okay, you it's not what me and you want to do. It's what the breach of the entity is itself. It's a what? Termination. Was that in all contracts? Is that it for the most part? Because we could put that there. It doesn't have to be trusteeship, but we're talking about it because a lot of trustees listen. So we always appreciate the trustees that listen. And we're going over it because a breach of trust is not keeping your word. And that's where we are at the vault is. We're tightening up the processes going into the new year. You all may see a different format come out for us for the workshop, especially for the January 14th. We could tell you all whatever flyer we get up there for January 14th will literally be a deal, and then coming out of that webinar, a lot of things will have kind of shifted into our new style of training because we've seen it for years now where even as a breach of trust with trustee training, you got to know that there's got to be a termination. Well, that's what the individual families and the individuals themselves and blah, blah, blah. Look, either way, when you have a breach, you got to know to terminate. And this is just a lead from the pack moment. Not sit here and have a moment where you're, oh man, well, what are we supposed to do in these type of situations? This is what we're talking about. If there's a breach, then what do? There's a termination. It's not, oh, well, why would I do that? Or what? Look, is that in the contract? You all have to be able to look and say, okay, well, what about my family? Am I, is this mine, or what? Did I breach? What's wrong with starting over? Oh man, I don't know if I want to start over. Well, there was a breach. You know why you might have to start over or start from a different position because it was a breach. How long do you hold out for it? You just go through the contract and then you look and says see where it says that and then you have to cite it and go ahead and make that minute for it and call it a day. Why not sit there and just say, "Yep, we got to go ahead and do that because that's what it says. You're honoring the governing instrument." So how are we not seeing the benefit of, oh man, whatever it says? That's on the public and the private side. That's not just, oh, it's private, but how are you not honoring the governing instrument? If a breach of trust comes from you not honoring the governing instrument, we already know it's called a breach of trust, and that's that. So thanks everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. We're gonna go ahead and put the flyer up for the webinar we got coming up this weekend. It's so close and so upon us, so we definitely want to go ahead and just say we look forward to everybody going be that's gonna be there. Once again, we're doing this for our foundation trustees, but at the end of the day, we are opening it up to outside of foundation trustees. Uh, so other people can come into the webinar if you're not a foundation trustee. We've had some questions about that. Just feel free to reach out to the vault. We'll make it a point to respond. Christian at Trust Christian email is back up. The foundation, what is it, hfrn period vault. You all can use that, but we're back at the Christian at trustchristian.com email, so we know we get a bunch of emails to that one since it's working again for the webinar. Well, we'll get it. We'll see if we can get a flyer up there too. That doesn't conflict with the emails. You kind of get the email registration and go forward from there. We do have a cutoff period, which is the 17th for tickets. A lot of people say, "Oh, was it going to be recorded?" And this is where we have to tell you this episode is about recording the content over at the vault. The breach of contract is people taking the content, stealing the intellectual property from the vault, and we're just, we're not in the mode to terminate, so we're just not allowing the event to be recorded. And so, that's on our end for protection because there's no need to record something, ladies and gentlemen, if you're taking quality notes and the events cater to the size of the room. So, you know, we know how many families that we want to deal with throughout the years, and it's not, we're in the 1%. We know what the 1% is talking about as far as having conversations. So we're not, oh, we need to have 50 million people in the room. That's not 1%. That's way less than that. So way more than that. So we're not focused on that. We're focused on working with families in a private capacity, having quality engagements, and so the breach of contract episode is really just focused on talking about even protected intellectual property, compromising human capital or financial capital, just any of those things. Those things are important. So the breach of contract is, are you having prudent investor mentality? Are you an investor? That's another thing. So definitely look forward to connecting with people that reach out Christian at trustchristian.com or hfrn.vault@gmail.com. Once again, that's Christian at trustchristian.com or hfrn.vault@gmail.com, and we'll get back out to you because we definitely got the webinar coming up here. In a few days, we're going to send that link out and we're going to go forward from there. So it's going to be a great opportunity for the family foundation families. We actually may do an interview with a family and get them to, kind of go over their experience recently with the vault. Someone said that might be a big plus, but, we'll do that. But outside of that, we will always appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay, and moving forward from there. Uh, and, appreciate everybody. Christian at trustchristian.com, hfrn.vault at gmail.com for the webinar that's going to be on Saturday. It is going to be power packed when it comes to the specific pieces of information when we talk about that. Investing from charity, private family banking from the charity, and making it a point to be in compliance at all times. Those things are important with charity. So we look forward to just having those conversations and sharing the notes that we have with the vault, but these with our private participants because that's where it's at. The education is in the private. So look forward to hearing from you all on the Vault webinar, which is public versus private foundation. Really going over how to use it to your advantage, as opposed to just only knowing about one. Look forward to hearing from you all. Peace. Enjoy.